University is starting back soon, so many of my friends started moving back to town. I am 17 female, live in a house with 5 friends. I wasn't born in the UK but moved here with my parents when I was 17. We come from another European country, so I speak my native language, English, which is far from perfect. I've been learning Spanish and English since I was little, and my Spanish is better than my English. I don't have an obvious accent in English, people just assume that I am Canadian. We had a small party on Saturday and one friend brought his new girlfriend, Jess. Jess 20, and she's the reason why I am posting here. Jess made sure to let everyone know that she's a polyglot and speaks multiple languages. I was obviously impressed. I study modern languages, meaning that I'm learning Italian and German on top of Spanish. And obviously I asked what languages she speaks: Spanish, Japanese, Arabic, my native language, German, Korean, and French. I told her how impressed I was and carried on with my evening. I had a short phone call with my mom, whom I obviously speak to in my native tongue, and I went out of the house to talk to her. Jess was out in the garden and heard my conversation, and she corrected me on my pronunciation. I told her that she was in the wrong and she insisted that she knows better. I didn't fancy getting into any arguments, so I ignored her and went back inside saying whatever. Later, I bumped my head and swore loudly in Spanish. I tend to code switch a lot when drunk, and she corrected my pronunciation, which was funny because it was her who was incorrect. I ignored her again. A while later I wanted my friend, who is from Spain, to hand me something, but I forgot how it's called in English. So I said, "Hand me Spanish word, please," knowing my friend would understand. Jess decided to correct me again, using completely incorrect word. My friend and I looked at each other, and me being drunk, I lost any self-control I had. I spoke to Jess in Spanish asking her what the hell she thinks she's doing. And she looked at me telling me that my Spanish was so wrong that she didn't understand a word. It wasn't, but okay. So I told her the same thing in my native tongue, to which she replied with the same thing. I laughed at her and told her it's my native language and she really shouldn't lie about being a polyglot and correcting people when she doesn't actually speak those languages. She was fuming. She tried to grab her boyfriend's hand and leave with him, but he was too drunk to care and just said, "Told you to stop lying." I don't know how she got my number, but she called me this morning screaming what an asshole I am to humiliate her like that, and if she knew I spoke the language, she wouldn't have corrected me. I do feel bad now. I realize how humiliating this must have been for her, but on the other hand, she shouldn't have been lying. My husband Nick was married to his first wife Vanessa for 5 years, and they had 2 amazing kids, Luke and Lila. Sadly, Vanessa died in an accident 11 years ago when the kids were very young. I started dating Nick 8 years ago, and we started off very slowly for obvious reasons. Nick has always been a little more distant than anyone I'd ever been with. But he and the kids lost Vanessa so young that I understood it. After 3 years of dating, Nick asked me to marry him and I moved in. I've always had a really great relationship with Luke and Lila, and they were happy for me to marry their dad. I had wanted an actual wedding, nothing big. But Nick really didn't want one, so we got married at the courthouse with just Luke and Lila present. We had a really fast engagement, but it worked for all of us. I have loved being Luke and Lila's stepmom and officially adopted them after I found out I was pregnant with our son, Casey. The kids have been so great with Casey and help out so much. Nick was wonderful during the pregnancy and had always been a really loving dad and husband. But Nick has been pulling away a lot the last few months. He's been even more distant than usual and working late nights and going away with friends almost every weekend. I've tried talking to him, but he's been impatient with both me and the kids. I found out I was pregnant in June and am now 21 weeks pregnant with a girl. The kids are excited to have a little sister, but Nick just seems so indifferent to everything and everyone. He's been missing soccer games, Lila's birthday, doctor's appointments, etc. Casey is too young to notice, but Luke and Lila are so hurt by their dad's absence. These kids are so good and they lost their mom so young, and I'm infuriated that Nick is ignoring the kids like this. Last week, I finally sat Nick down and told him that he needs to stop disappearing and be more present in our lives. We're going to have another child soon, and before we know it Luke and Lila will be grown up and going to college. After an hour of arguing, he screamed at me that he wished Vanessa was still alive and that I had switched places with her and died instead. He also threw in some awful comments that I need to stop pretending I'm Luke and Lila's real mom and that I'm only half the mom Vanessa was. The final straw was him saying that he never even wanted any kids with me, but did it so I'd keep busy and leave him alone. I'm so beyond hurt right now. I know I'm just his second choice. But I've always tried to honor Vanessa and tell Luke and Lila how lucky they were to have her as their mom. I love all of our kids more than anything, and I'm just so heartbroken. Nick barely pays attention to Casey now and doesn't even acknowledge the pregnancy. He somewhat apologized this weekend and took all 3 kids to lunch, but he won't even look me in the eye. He seems like he wants to talk, but he doesn't say anything, and I'm too upset to even be near him. I'm not sure where to go from here. Honestly, I can't even be around Nick right now, and if there weren't any kids involved, I'd leave and never look back. I'm not sure if he's cheating or the thought of a 4th child is stressing him out. But I'm devastated and not sure how or why I should save this marriage, besides doing it for the kids. My boyfriend of almost 3 years told me a series of white lies that to me seem more serious. Can't tell if I'm overreacting or if this is actually indicative of a bigger problem. My boyfriend and I have been dating for almost 3 years, living together for 2. We have a pretty good relationship, obviously with ups and downs, but we make it work and are happy. A little background on me and my boyfriend. I come from a single-parent home. My father was absent. My mother was and is by no means perfect, but she did her best with what she had. We were poor. Life was never easy for us, but we had each other. Since I was pretty young, I've wanted to pay her back someday. I've worked incredibly hard to be able to do so. I help her financially as much as I can and regularly pay her bills back / send her cash. I'm also her only living child now, as my brother passed away 5 years ago, which basically left me to help her. I don't care, I love my mother, and the right thing to do is to help her when she needs it. But it is stressful. This is relevant because my boyfriend described coming from a somewhat similar past, and it is something we have bonded over. Having the mutual experiences seemed to bring us closer. He told me he also helped his parents financially, and we would often vent to each other about the stress it brings. I am not one to confide in many people, so having someone who I felt like actually understood me was meaningful to me. So here is where the lies come in, and I need someone to either tell me I'm not crazy and this is horror, or that I am crazy and this isn't a huge deal. I'm fine with either. When we met, my boyfriend lived in a condo in a pretty swanky part of the city. I live in the US Northeast. He told me he owned that apartment / condo. I found this to be interesting / odd because he was 28 at the time, and I know this property is upwards of $650,000 on the low end, and he was in an entry-level job for only like 2 years, so the numbers just didn't really add up. Whatever, maybe he's good at saving. But then, since living together, I never once saw a piece of mail for a mortgage payment, electric bill, taxes, nothing. Not for 2 whole years. Very odd. Also, when we started living together, he didn't have his room rented out in the former apartment yet, so he was still responsible for that portion of the rent. He would send a Venmo payment to his mother on the 1st of every month for his portion. I don't own property, but I can't think of a scenario where I would Venmo my mother to pay the mortgage on a property I supposedly own. Getting more odd. He would then go to his parents' house for an afternoon and come back really upset. Usually when I would ask why, it was because they were having financial problems and he needed to help them out. I totally understood this and supported him. He literally has cried on my shoulder about this many times. He tried to start a company years back and ended up getting into debt somehow. He told me this debt was $17,000 and that he paid it off. I'm confused because I met him only 2 to 3 years after the supposed debt accrued back / company dissolved, and it was already paid off. He told me when he moved back home after the business failed, he was $17,000 in debt and living at his parents' house working at a minimum wage job. How someone with a minimum wage job pays off that much debt in 3 years, I'll never know. We got into a fight a few weeks ago and I finally had enough and confronted him about these things. He doesn't help his parents, they actually pay his phone bill, and this was all a lie. He doesn't own that apartment, he didn't pay off that debt from his company. He initially told me his parents helped pay it off and then like 3 minutes later, came clean. and said that his business partner paid it off, so I have literally no idea what the truth is there, and if anything, in my eyes, his parents are the ones who are financially supporting him. So now, I'm dating a 31 years old man who doesn't pay his own phone bill, was lying to me and / or completely fabricating aspects of his life for 3 years. And then when confronted about it, continued to make up lies and then came clean about them 5 minutes later. I'm obviously concerned that he could lie for this long, about fundamentally important things like our values, and so on. I sincerely thought I would marry this man. He seemed to understand me like no one else and to be a truly caring and genuine person. Now I'm having a hard time rationalizing actually planning a life around someone who would not only lie about their background and family etc. but also financial aspects. Aside from that, I now can't tell what is the truth and what is a lie. I've also noticed other things he has lied about, called him out on it, and he has denied it outright to my face. I see this as a form of gaslighting, as I know I'm not wrong, but he is trying to convince me otherwise. Am I overreacting? Is this a white lie that went haywire? Or is this actually a series of complete and utter bullshit used to manipulate me? And also, is it insane for me to actually consider a life with this man? I'm 19 years old female, was traveling alone on an 11-hour flight today. And a guy in his 20s is in the same row as me. I was exhausted because I only got 4 hours of sleep before the flight so I could sleep on the plane, but this guy, we'll call him C, keeps trying to make conversation. C starts off by telling me he's autistic, and then asking me if I like K-pop, and he keeps non-stop talking and rarely gives me a chance to speak, not that I wanted to. I tried to be polite because I have ADHD and I understand how social cues are difficult, so he probably can't tell I'm not in the mood. Over the course of the next 20 minutes I tell C maybe 5 times I want to sleep and put my headphones on, and each time, C begins speaking to me after maybe 2 minutes of silence. Finally, I was able to sleep for around 4 hours, but when I woke up C started up again. I'm still really tired, and I had some personal issues the day before my flight, so I'm also socially exhausted. But I let him talk for a bit before I start watching a show on my phone. I tell him maybe 5 separate times that I'm trying to watch a show, and that I'm not interested in talking to him right now, but maybe later. C still keeps trying to talk to me, and when I snap a bit and tell him I'm getting a bit annoyed, he goes into a full-on self-hating, "I'm so sorry, I'm horrible, God, I'm just gonna shut up now" rant. And I feel bad because I should have been nicer to him, and I can understand emotions being too strong and spiraling. I tell C that it's okay, and I just want some time to myself as I'm not the chattiest person, but maybe later we can talk. I put my headphones on and watched my show, but C kept trying to speak to me, but this time I ignored him. Which was honestly a shitty move from me, but I just didn't have the energy at this point to interact with him. This was the wrong move, as he moved to get out of the row and stood in the aisle and began yelling at me. I didn't catch everything he said, but it was along the lines of, "Why can't women believe not all men are bad? Some men are on your side. I'm a nice guy, why are you ignoring me?" He storms off to the bathroom, and I take that chance to ask a flight attendant if I can change my seat because he really freaked me out, and I didn't want to have a panic attack on a plane. The flight attendants were amazing and got my stuff and moved me far away from him. I feel like I'm TA because he does have autism, and I could have been more patient maybe, and ignoring him was a shit thing to do.